welcome everyone to this another sacred conversation. And this time, I mean, I say it every time. Hi, Louise. I love it, love it. But I've known Louise for a while, and Louise is really talking about inclusivity and about her history and her background and her country. So before we start, what I'd like to do, before I get Louise to start in, I'd like to say she is from the Warrawa Noongar, and I know what she's decided, what we've agreed to before we start was A, to have messy hair just to be here for who we are, and to also to be able to talk to each other with openness about the words that we use and inclusivity, because I get a little bit nervous. Am I going to say the wrong thing, the right thing? But I know Louise will come back. We're just going to have a conversation to show everyone this is how it can be done. If we inadvertently make a mistake, that we don't need to, or me, I don't need to go into shame about around this. So I'm really excited about that. She's an inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship coach, which we will talk a little bit about more. And it's all about starting to be truth-telling on all levels. But before, again, I start, I really want to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. It's a privilege to be here on this land. And as it happens, Louise and I are in the same state, WA, Perth. So it makes it even more powerful for me. I've gone goosebumpy and I can just feel, oh, I just need to take a moment. The love, the compassion, and the welcomeness that I have sitting on this land, being able to have you here with me and with those of us who are going to watch. That I'm also part of this land and part of the history, but I can also be part of the future of honouring the First Nations people. And the more I'm around you and watch you on Facebook and Instagram, we'll give that details later, and I'm working with an Aboriginal psychologist personally through trauma, but also understanding what a privilege it is to be here and to give a voice to it, and you help me to give a voice. Welcome, Louise.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you so much for that beautiful welcome.
Thank you. I just think sometimes we need to sit with this, don't we, Louise? We need to sit with what comes up for us. Why do we, and I'm going to say we as white people, so I'm going to use that, white, even privileged people, is why do we have this resistance? Yes, I know it's history. Yes, I know I look back at my family and some of the things they've said and done, and the reparation, but I want to contribute to that because it was out of their awareness. You know, I feel the shame.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to restore that. How do I become part of the healing and be able to be open with my shame around it? But also part of the truth, as you call it, truth telling, telling stories, being open to hearing them and not making it about me and keeping it, as you said, we're here, and particularly this conversation, this is about you, not me, but I will share part of that with you.
We're certainly coming to this space together.
Yes.
It is one where both of us are coming in for that respectful, beautiful conversation, to be open and willing to listening and connecting on deeper levels. But what you've already said so far and what's already coming up for me, there are so many things we can already talk about. And one thing that I do want to talk about that dropped in really quickly for me was the pause that we both enjoyed together.
Yes.
It is okay to pause. Silence does not need to be filled all the time. There is space for pauses, and that space allows us a beautiful, almost compassionate moment for ourselves to be able to receive what we have just witnessed or what we have just received. And it was a gift. And often things like words of wisdom, often things like truth telling and stories about experiences are gifts. Even if they are traumatic, even if they are sad, they're still gifts because they add to our deeper understanding of the human experience, not only of our own communities in which we identify with, but communities of other people. And that is a gift is an understatement. It adds to the richness of our understanding of how our world operates and allows us the opportunity to be better humans in it. So there is so much beauty in that one thing alone.
Thank you.
Again, in the silence of this conversation.
And perhaps I need to do a pause again, just to exactly allow that to come into our hearts and into our body. Because I think something we talked about before we came on, and privilege works to silence. See, this is a different silence.
Yeah.
And this is what I love. So the pause, it's a pause to be silent, but not silenced, or to, it's a different aspect. And I'm not wording it well here, but you just hit something very powerful. Because we've been silenced.
Noongar language, we call that Dahni. So that's your tongue, da. It's
Right.
listening. Your tongue is listening. You're deep listening to what you've just received. You're deep listening to the story. You're deep listening to the whole of the other person. And with that, you are not looking for an answer. You're not looking for a solution. You are not looking for a response. It is contemplation with what you have just received.
Now, I do take notes because that way it helps me concentrate. So when you do that, and also about to reflect back, so I'm hearing you and I'm listening to you, because this has just gone everywhere. And the other thing I'm finding to everywhere in my heart and compassion, what I'm also learning with this, I love it, Dahni, this pause, is to feel.
Yeah.
I don't need to always have, even though I'm writing, because it's also for me to reflect back when I go to upload it. But I'm hearing you, but I don't need to always hear the words. I can hear the feeling.
Yes.
That for me has been powerful learning. So coming back to this Dahni, I love that.
Yeah. It's the presence of the person. It's the energy of the person.
Yes.
It is what they're saying, what they're not saying.
Yes.
It is the whole of the person.
Yes.
It's the whole of the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I think poignantly what you've said is what they're not saying.
Yeah.
I think we just need to pause on that, what you're not saying and what perhaps you're not feeling you're able to say. And I think this can be for anyone who's watching and listening. Just think about that for other people, but also for yourself. I mean, again, it's about all of us. What are we not able to say? Where have we all been silenced? Where are we silencing? Like you're saying, where have we silenced you and your peoples, the nation?
What things are you feeling are not okay and you want to say something about, but something's stopping you?
That's it. And again, it's taking that pause to look at what is stopping me. Is it because I don't know how? Is it for fear of retribution? Does it feel scary? Does it feel dangerous? Will I be judged?
Yeah. And not even what are you saying through your mouth, but what are you saying through your own personal expression of yourself? Where are you holding yourself back in terms of your own expression of who you are?
Yeah.
And why are you holding that back? What is holding you back from that?
Yes. Yes, what is holding you back? And this is what I love about you and your work, is coming back to inclusion, diversity. So this to me is, yes, you are focusing on sharing your story and your truth telling, which in fact I'd like in a moment for you, if you're happy to share your story so people have got more understanding, because I know you. But again, it's more, you're doing this, so it's this and this, but it's whole, and I'm loving that because I relate to all of that from my own point of view of trauma, how I work with clients. It's all of that, but it's how can I use that to take it across to what you're saying.
And how the beautiful thing about inclusion, the beautiful thing about inclusion is that it's for all of us. It's not just for certain groups of people. It's for all of us. And as it stands under the current privilege system that we're operating in, it is a system that will systematically oppress certain people, systematically exclude certain people, systematically provide challenges and deny accessibility. And when we get to a point where we liberate that, we liberate those groups of people from experiencing those things, and we liberate ourselves from the privilege system, that impacts every human, because the privilege system itself, nobody is good enough for that system. There's not a single person on the planet that meets the standard of someone who is the most privileged. So it's like this clawing away, trying to climb this ladder that no one will ever be good enough for. It will always move the goalposts. No one on the planet is good enough for our current privilege system. And so if we liberate ourselves from that, just imagine the wholeness we can feel within ourselves, that we are enough. We are amazing. We are free. We are safe to express ourselves, to be ourselves without the fear that the privilege puts on us to behave in a certain way, to speak in a certain way, to look in a certain way, to treat others in a certain way. It is the liberation of everyone.
I like that. Wow, that just really hit. It is the liberation of everyone. And I think you were saying, and you brought it up, is fear. The system keeps us constantly in fear, which means it keeps us controlling of us on every single level: what we wear, what we say, what we think, how we live, what money we spend, etc., etc. And it's fear-based. Yeah,
absolutely. Every single sector of our life. And this is why often it seems really complex to be able to understand or explain what privilege is, because it's literally every single sector of your entire life. That system has been made in a way that you can't see where the line is between privilege and anything other than that. And when you're born into a system where that's the only thing you know, you're indoctrinated into the system.
yes.
And it's very hard to imagine anything other than the existence in that particular way. But it's not the only way. There are so many other ways to live our lives and be social and have our social cultures.
Yes. Yes. And I like that, because I know when it first came up, when we first started talking about it more openly, because like you said, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I had a reaction like, oh, really? No. So it was really interesting for to unpack and unravel and hear what you're saying, that I had a reaction initially.
Yeah. And it's really important in those moments to be very gentle with yourself.
Yes.
Not be hard on yourself and go, well, why haven't I seen this until this point?
Yes.
Or sometimes you might realize how you're participating in the system, and it can result in not nice things happening to other people. Sometimes you have those realizations, but it's important to be gentle with that growth, to allow it to continue to grow and to continue to understand. Because essentially, you are looking at the paradigm of how you have understood the whole universe to work. And we are now, just little bit by little bit, breaking those really rigid, horrible structures. And we're looking at new ways. We're molding it in a different way. We're innovating the way you understand things in new ways. So we don't want it to be a full crumbling. We don't want it to be you collapse on yourself and it's a really hard, traumatic thing. What would be great to happen is in those situations, if we can go, oh, I had this big realization. Can I sit with this realization? Can I allow myself to accept what has been, but now with my new knowledge and my new growth, to look at how I can move forward in a better way, in a more loving or accepting or inclusive way, and allow it to be really, really gentle, so that the behavior and the action can be changed very quickly. And when the behavior and action can be changed very quickly, that automatically ripples out into our families. It ripples out to our communities, into our businesses. And that's where social change comes into it.
Oh, again, let's just take a moment. That's huge. Because as you're talking, what I felt it again in my body and felt. And I think the words that came up is, I'll use me as an, how can I remain vulnerable and open as well as being gentle, to constantly receiving, not always getting it right, but being open to learning and not triggering into that deep shame that I have anyhow from personal experience from my childhood,
Yeah.
but then from this bigger, so it's micro and macro. So how can I stay, or however you want to put it, be able to stay with this shame that we're feeling, but just to honor that it's there.
Yeah, absolutely honor that it's there. You can feel it. But in that feeling, knowing that your spirit, your Wirren, does not align with that feeling. The reason you're feeling so terrible about that is because your spirit doesn't agree with that. It's not the thing that the soul is wanting. The soul is wanting the opposite of the shame.
Yes.
And that's the thing. So if you can have that, those moments, if you need it, of feeling the shame and feeling what it feels like, because when we experience those things, it tells us the things we don't want, and then informs us of what we actually do want. If we can accept that and allow it to move through us, or for us to move through it, whichever way you picture that in your mind, but then looking, okay, what is that opposite thing? What is the thing that my soul is actually seeking? And sit in that energy of it. Because we do live in a vibrational world, and it's something that my culture certainly do understand, the energy and the vibrations of everything on multiple different planes, that we will attract that stuff to us. So if you're sitting in shame and you're wanting to, I don't know, for instance, takes any kind of action, inclusive action, based in that space of shame or based from that can only bring more of it to us.
Yes.
We want this beautiful inclusive movement, this inclusion revolution, to be one that is based in, I don't know, freedom, in love, acceptance, belonging,
compassion,
community, compassion, all of those beautiful, liberty, liberation, all of those beautiful feelings. If we can sit in those feelings, go from this space where I feel this and I have a vision for what we can be experiencing. It's different from what it is now, but I can see it in my mind that we live life in a different way, where we all feel loved and cherished and valued and accepted, and we can express ourselves in our true authenticity.
Yes.
That is the energy, that amazing, powerful, extraordinary change is created from.
Yes, and I really like that, express self in true authenticity. And I think also what my experience has been in the world, because I lived in different countries and languages and all that, when we don't understand something, we fear it. So when we don't understand it, we silence it.
Yes.
Whether that be a religion, a culture, like you said, anyone, or just how someone is, who dares to be different, who dares to live differently. It's fear. So we shut it down. And I think the other thing you said as well, and I've just gone blank.
Oh, that's probably because I've got something to say in response to that.
Good, you say it then.
So a lot of the time when we do experience something different from ourselves, or communities of people who aren't identifying the same way we identify, we can feel what we seem to think is fear. Right. But I would encourage you to dig deeper into that, because sometimes it's not fear.
Okay.
It's like a longingness.
Yes.
Because I'm feeling this certain way, but really I want that connectedness to that person.
Yes.
Really, I want to be able to see myself in that person.
I like
really, that. I want a friendship with that person. And so sometimes I feel like we misinterpret the feeling that we're going on, but it's a feeling we don't feel often. And so sometimes it just gets categorized in with fear, rather than going, actually, no, this isn't what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like I'm wanting or longing to be connected to that person and accepting and all those beautiful things of that person. Because it's the opposite. Again, it's the opposite of what you're feeling.
Exactly right. And again, I think that's what we are trained to think, is again what we talked about earlier, the privileged system that's in a patriarchal system. I thought that was a beautiful way you described that. We are living always from fear. As you said, that comes back to control rather than and being able to say, actually, I accept that person for who they are and their differentness, because it can be guiding me to, as you said, to connect to my own longingness of wanting to be different or doing things differently.
Yeah.
So it's how do we unbind ourselves? I use to unbind ourselves from all this attachments and all these strings on, as you said, every level. Yeah.
And it's not about not having those feelings or not having those thoughts.
That's right. Yeah.
It's about catching them in the moment and questioning and becoming a very good critical thinker and going, why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking this thought? And asking yourself questions like, is it real?
Yes.
Well, you know, let me start with, is it true?
Yes.
Is it something, what I'm thinking, does it something that actually really happens in the world? Or is it just a story? Is it real? As in, has it happened to me? Have I witnessed these things? Have I ever experienced these things? And then is it mine? Or have I picked up someone else's story and just suddenly claimed it as my own story?
Yes, and that's something, I don't know why this comes to mind. And I remember from when I was brought up in England, A levels, and they talked about the War of the Roses, you know, the red and white, and it just goes down and down. So no one knows generations later why there's this massive, why the families or the country are still warring. It's just there because, like you said, we've just taken it on as mine, haven't we?
Yes. And what for?
And what exactly right? And what
it's a lot of discomfort. It's a lot of unpleasantness. It is not a fun way to experience life. Why do we need to carry those things generationally that do not serve us today?
And they don't. Exactly right. And they don't. I agree. And I think the other thing you a bit earlier, first of all, before we started, we used a couple of beautiful words. I know it was here, Dahni. I think you used another one. And what I'm liking about that is you're showing me, pardon?
We're in.
That's it.
Spirit.
That's it. That's it. I didn't write. Yes, we're in. What that is showing is this comes from your confidence, your strength, your ability to be able to hold your own space and say, use your words. I love it because it's giving me a richness in my life. It's showing me. And what before we started, everyone, we did a little ritual. I lit a candle to bring our spirits and guides in, and also to welcome in those of our land. But also, Louise has had made up. Do you want to describe what you did? Your little,
So I've got a little vial of essential oils, and I was working with an amazing friend to create a beautiful mix specifically for inclusion. And this is something that my members in my in the Inclusion Creators Collective membership get, and there's so much intentionality in this. It's uses essential oils that bring in ancestral and your heritage. It is something that speaks to your resilience and strength. It's something that supports compassion. It is something that supports growth and expansion and healing. So there is so much intentionality in such a tiny little bottle.
Yes.
And you just use a little bit, but the intention in there and the vibrations from each of those different essential oils was very intentional for that support. And this can go not only just from an oil, but into our everyday lives, into being very intentional with our energy, being very intentional in the way we are talking about things, in the way we are interacting socially, in the way we are using our copy, in the way we are marketing, in the way we are pricing our services or products, in all the bits and pieces that make up everything of our lives. Having that intentionality to be one that is inclusive. And one of the biggest parts to inclusion is the listening part. Really listening. Because if you are on that privileged end of the scale, and by far, if you are someone who has white skin, like I do, that is one of the top privileges you can have, is the color of your skin being white. if you can be in a space of going, I don't actually have to come up with any solutions. I don't have to know what to do or say and come up with it with my own mind. If you are listening to people who are oppressed, if you're listening to marginalized people in the marginalized communities, they will tell you what the problems are and they will call for you to take action in certain ways. And all you need to do is to listen to the call and fulfill that call. So you don't have to go and try and learn everything about everything. You don't have to have all the stats. You don't have to have all the information. What you need to have is an amazing capacity to listen, or be willing and open to expand your capacity for listening and to seek out marginalized voices and make sure they're part of your feeds. They're part of your everyday interactions. They're in your friendship circles. And expose and have that representation of lots of different voices within those communities.
Wow, it just feels like you said it's amazing, but also it's big but not big. It's
Yeah.
how do we stay with this that it doesn't overwhelm? Because I know at times, I don't know if your experience as well. Sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we then shut down. It all feels too much. I'll let someone else do that. You know?
All the time. The overwhelm to freezing. Yeah,
and exactly, we freeze and then go, okay, this is too hard. And this is what I'm loving about who you are, and also the conversation. You said again, it's just be kind, be gentle. Just tiny little steps can make, then that's what will ripple out, is those little steps.
Yeah, one step at a time. That's one step, and making sure that that step is a really beautiful, intentional, strong step. And then once that step is firm, you take them to the next step. And it's exactly like walking. There are so many analogies you can do just from have everyday life in this. When you're walking, you're not going to take more than one step if that first step isn't steady, because you know you'll probably fall. Wait till it's steady, take the step, wait till it's steady, then take your next step, and then take your next step. And that adds to your journey. Every step gets us a step closer to that vision, to that inclusive world, to that space where you can express yourself authentically, where you can feel safe to do that. Every step. And just imagining, so you were taking one step, right? But if everyone on the planet took one step, I don't even know how many people we have on the planet now. What is it say? Is it still
no
7
idea.
billion?
Billions.
So if every person took one step, you're looking at 7 billion acts in a single day or in a single hour. And then they take a second step. Just imagine the change that can happen from people taking single steps and committing to single steps.
Yes. I think it's the committing as well. So it's that coming from awareness. So there's that as well. Those steps are coming from, well, I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
To resentment and shame, perhaps, that I have to change into each step. And I think the other word I came into when you were talking as well is then just listening to the knowing. It becomes a knowing. Then you're coming into your intuition. You hear, then you know more. You feel more able to then. Because you're listening to yourself as well as those around you. So it's a two-way thing. So you're listening to you, listening to others, and it becomes this beautiful exchange of, well, okay, this is what they said, this is what's been said. I need to now listen to my own reaction. How can I then go back? I don't know. So there's that beautiful container that we can hold. And I think the other thing you said earlier is like, we might not understand. We don't need to understand. This is something I learned too, but accept. And you may not ever appreciate or might not like what you're hearing, or that's okay. It's learning to understand and hold that space.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that fear too is based in how we're conditioned to interact with each other on subjects that feel a little bit heavy or hard. We are led by example on things like politics and how to do those kinds of things, and they seem horrendous They seem scary. They seem very confrontational. And most of us don't want to be involved in the drama. We don't want that stuff. But there is another way to do it, which we're not shown, which we're not taught. And that is a space of neutrality, where it actually doesn't matter what anyone else around you does or doesn't do, that we're not here to actually convince anyone of anything. We're not here to convince people to change who they are, what they do, what they believe, or anything like that. But in ourselves, we know, we feel a calling that we are not living to our true self. Yes. And to go, I'm going to be in this way. It's my beingness is going to be different. And it doesn't matter what anyone else believes or thinks or says or does about that. And also when you're speaking about the importance of inclusion, of not worrying about whether people agree with you or not. They don't have to agree with everything, because we're all humans and we're all different and complex and we don't agree with everything. And that's absolutely okay. But to be okay with that, because we're taught so much that belonging is so important. And if we don't all agree and we're not all like-minded, in some way we don't belong.
That's it.
And that's not true.
Exactly. We don't belong. We don't. Yes.
We always belong.
Yes, we do. Exactly. We get ostracized with all that. I've actually lost a bit of track of time because I'm so loving this conversation. So I'm just, what I'd like, there's just so much. And I think that space of neutrality, that is really, and the words that come to mind is when you as an individual come to that place of courage, strength, wisdom, self-belief.
Yeah.
As well. So it's your growth that's going to support others' growth, and then listening, and then that place of neutrality. Yeah. Now, you said something earlier, which that's what I was going to say, was about fear. And something I've learned about is, like you said, it's you're not aligned. That's what I often look at with fear. When I go into fear, like you hear shame, you used it with shame, is you are no longer aligned. Like you said, you've gone outside of yourself. You've gone into the ego, the whatever you wanted, the voices, the stories, rather than being here. And rather than seeing it a nice, not fear, but a longing. So you don't see it as a longing.
Yeah. Yep. And a big understanding, the basis of that is our humanness. And it links in also with this last conversation I just said, was having that space of neutrality. So many people are fearful of confrontation or upsetting people by talking about this stuff. Now, here's where there's a defined line between politics and human rights. This stuff is not political. This stuff is human rights. And everyone has a right to those human rights. The politics of it is what actions, how we get to that space of having guaranteed access to our human rights. So don't talk about the politics. It's not for privileged people to talk about. It's for the oppressed people to talk about and provide the solutions for. The underprivileged people, the oppressed people can talk about the politics. If we can sit in a space of, this is a human right and this is why I support this thing, there's no one on the planet in their right mind who would argue with that, because that would mean they would want to be denying their own human rights too.
So what I'm again here, and I want to reflect back, two things that are really powerful is you really listen to human rights.
Yeah.
Because when you really listen, you really hear, and you hear the rights of a human being.
Yep.
And I in that reframe of, it's actually the people need to talk about their rights, not be told, because again, that's coming in from that, or we know better than you.
Yes, we don't want to be saviors. We are not saviors. Yeah. We're supporters.
Yes.
We can see that you are being mistreated in some way. We can see from the stories that you've shared with us that things are not okay in your life experience. And we support you in a life where you thrive. where you feel safe, where you are happy, where you have access to everything else that all other humans have access to.
And that is it. That is basically, in a nutshell, the whole conversation and all the rest. Are you happy just to share for the last few moments how you got to this place? Are you happy to share that?
Sure.
And then as you do that, we can look at how to contact you and connect with you, and one last whatever, something you'd like to share with others. So I'd love to hear a little bit of your story if you feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, sure. So how I kind of came into this type of work was I was born. That is, and I am an Aboriginal woman, and that speaks volumes in terms of the level of exclusion that it might not even speak volumes to you because you might not be aware of how that life experience is, but I promise you it's very exclusionary. In almost every space I have been in, I have felt the exclusion of myself, either as an Aboriginal person, so my culture was never included or considered, the language, the art, the knowledge, especially the knowledge and the importance and sacredness of our customs and our rituals and practices and things like that, when we're not ever acknowledged in those spaces. Being a little girl, it's the exact same thing. We're often not considered, and we're often taught very, very toxic and dangerous things to our own spirit about what constitutes a little girl and what is acceptable for a little girl or not a little girl. So a lot of that happened, and I really, at a very, very young age, probably about 5 or 6, I really recognized that my community was not included in all those spaces. And as a child, I tried to make sense of that. And so in my child mind, the sense that I made from it was that we are not welcome here. And if we're not welcome, why are we not welcome? Well, that must be because we're bad people or we're wrong in some way.
Yes.
We don't belong. And so that really started a internal self-hatred of who I am, what ran through my blood. Because also what the privilege system does is it will constantly send out messages othering and alienating certain groups of people. And those messages will often be really dehumanizing. So quite often you will find, and now that you know this, you might be able to pick up in social media, they will attribute animal features or traits to different groups of people. Or they will also attribute certain terrible acts to certain groups of people.
Yeah.
And they will do that messaging over and over and over again, even though you've never seen it, you've never witnessed it, and you've never seen any real facts about it. That messaging concretes a story about those groups of people.
Yeah.
So I started believing those things that I saw on the TV, that I heard on the radio, that I heard in regular conversations along the street, in stores, in all different places. And it was so hard to do that, and to identify as an Aboriginal person, that I wondered to myself, could I just deny it? Because I even had people saying to me, why would you say you're Aboriginal if you can get away with being white?
And I'm sorry, that's a typical reaction of,
Yeah. And so not understanding how important identity is to a human and to your soul, it was something that I considered. I'm not going to lie, because it seemed like if I just existed as a white person, life might be simpler and easier for me. I wouldn't have to be hurt so often, and even hurt by people that I love. I wouldn't have to do that. But what I found with that was it was so unbelievably, oh, I'm getting emotional, painful to deny who I am. Because I am, and I always have been Aboriginal. My heart calls me to that. My ancestors call me to that. But to actually have to deny that, or feel like ever being put in a position as a child to feel like I would need to deny part of myself to be able to be accepted or belong. How horrendous is that to do that to a child? And it was mostly adults doing this. It wasn't other children, it was adults doing this. And so that was like a really big low point. And I got to the point where, you know, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. So belonging is a massive thing for me, because I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't belong in my own country. If I didn't belong in my own country, where do I belong in the universe? And so it brought up trigger warning coming up. I contemplated, why even exist? Why exist if you can't be who you are? But and that was through my teen years. Getting through that, you just learnt to get along. You know, you just go with the motions. You just learnt to get along, and it was all. I'm not going to say it was okay, but I did it. I did it, and I could exist. And then an amazing, wonderful, magical thing happened. I fell pregnant with my first baby. And I was so excited, and my husband and I were going to have this beautiful family we'd been dreaming of for a long time. And then at one point, and I can remember the point where it happened, I was up the top of the staircase in my home, and I just thought to myself, it hit me. I'm birthing a baby into this world, and this world is not good enough for my baby. The world wasn't good enough for me. The world is not good enough as it is for anyone as it stands. And I felt the fear. And I thought to myself, I can't believe I'm going to bring a human that I love already so much into this world, knowing that they might experience the same things I experienced. So from there, I decided I'm going to change the world. That's it. There is no other option. I'm changing the world.
I shouldn't laugh, but yeah, thank you. I'm laughing. Yeah.
It's a joy. It's a joy.
It is a joy. It is a joy. And this is what I love. Thank you for that vulnerability, because this is giving others hope that you can turn something like this into this.
Yeah.
You are a beautiful, strong woman. I'm so thankful you are in my life.
Likewise.
Personally. And we've known each other for a long time. And I just like us to just pause. I just really want to pause to honor you. Thank you, Louise.
You're so welcome. Thank you for holding this space.
It's been a privilege.
Yeah. And you know, the beautiful thing is we can all change the world.
We can.
And if this resonates, we can do this together. If this resonates, I already feel like we're a team.
Yeah.
We're doing this together. It is a movement of liberation. It is a movement of freedom. It's a movement of inclusion.
Yeah.
Releasing ourselves from those constraints, from those expectations, from being controlled and told how we should be and live and experience our lives. Because it doesn't work for anyone. It's just painful, painful, painful for everyone.
Exactly. And I agree with you. And that comes back to your beautiful exclusivity is for everyone, no matter which way it is. And I think also the more we start to heal ourselves,
yes,
we are also healing others.
Yes.
or supporting the healing of others. So you coming
Mm-hmm.
on today, having the courage to do this is just what a gift. It is a gift. It really, really is a gift to humanity. Again, we're going to go, like you said, you have that image. This is a gift to humanity.
Yeah.
I can be selfish and say it to me and to those of us who watch, but it's more than that.
It
So again,
is.
thank
It
you.
is.
And thank you for allowing me, or coming back. I want to really acknowledge again the Wadjak people on the Noongar Nation.
Yeah. Very special, amazing people.
Very much. And I'm only learning, I've gone goosey again, how it is. And why wouldn't we honor that sacredness? But like I was saying to you before, anyway, I won't go because it's a whole other conversation. It's allowing me to be sacred, but me to honor that sacred, to know that I'm sacred here too.
Yeah.
That I can come back and do what you just said, a movement of liberation. What a beautiful way to, thank you for that way of ending. We can all change the world. We can do this together.
Yeah, yeah. And it's what's coming to me. I keep seeing the butterfly coming through, butterfly.
Yes.
So butterfly is something I use a lot in all of my marketing, but it's really very important to me. There is so much to the butterfly. And in Noongar language, we call it the bindi bindi.
Is that what, right, bindi
And
bindi.
so it's not only representative of personal transformations that you go through. So you go from that caterpillar into that beautiful butterfly. So it's the personal healing, the personal transformations in yourself, in the community, in the nation, in the world, but the ripples it creates. So the butterfly effect happens.
Yes.
When we choose, when we make a decision and we choose our beingness to be one of inclusion, we ripple that out into the world in direct and indirect ways. There are ways that you are doing things that are impacting people and their entire world that you might not ever know in the way you've done that, but it happens and you are doing that already. So you have that ripple effect, that ripple of inclusion already happening, but it's also the dreaming here. So it's bindi bindi dreaming here.
Okay.
So it's so linked in with culture. It's linked in with every human on the planet. It's linked in with what we have been. So the dream is about what we have been, what we're living right now, but also the dreaming is all time. So it's what's to come too. And we can choose what's to come. It hasn't been yet. We haven't experienced that thing yet.
Yes.
So what kind of thing do we want to be creating for the future? What do we want our future generations to be experiencing? What do we want us to be experiencing in the future? And what type of legacy do we want to leave? How do we want to be remembered in those history books? Because we are already part of the history books. Do we want to be known for a generation of people who said enough is enough? It's no longer okay to treat others in this way, and we're not going to stand for it. And although I might not be a politician or a prime minister or anything of that kind of authority, in my world, I have the autonomy to choose my beingness. I can choose to speak my truth. I can choose to listen to marginalized voices, and I can choose to fulfill the calls they are asking for. And that is not something that someone else can take away from you. You have your own autonomy in that.
That's it. Oh my gosh. I think we could have a whole nother conversation here. It's like, unfortunately, we're going to need to come to an end. But I thank you for, again, sharing bindi bindi dreaming. I am bringing some of these beautiful aspects in to bring it to our awareness, the magnificence of who you are and where you come from and how it's inclusive for all of us. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So everyone who have got any questions or anything's come up, please put it into the comments. One of us will get back.
Yes.
And we will also have Louise. Do you want to just explain what I'm going to put in the description, how they can contact you?
Sure. So the very best ways to get in contact with me is either on my Facebook, Instagram, or my TikTok.
Okay.
So I love being on them. Absolutely. So if you jump in there, that's the best way to do that. I have many resources if you are new to this kind of stuff, and if you just want like gentle introductions into this, especially around your business. If you want to learn how to be more inclusive in your business, there is that. But then it goes all the way to really in-depth, intense work on self and business as well. So I would just love for you to just come along and say hello and just let us know that you've even listened or watched this.
Yes, I think that is that first step, isn't it?
Yeah,
that is that first step. And they've listened to the
Yeah.
whole lot, because you've been my longest, but it's been an absolute, I don't know, it's just thank you. And I think Spirit's
And share it.
And
share it, please.
Yeah, and please do exactly right, despite the length, because you can listen in bite sizes, because there's a lot here to unpack, unravel. You might or people who what you might experience triggers, but just know you're being held by not only me, but mainly by Louise. You're being held without judgment,
Absolutely.
you know, and share, because the more we share, the more we can have that beautiful rippling effect, and the bindi bindi, beautiful, the butterfly, the bindi bindi dreaming.
Yes.
Again, thank you, my beautiful friend.
You're so welcome.
Just, thank you. It's opened me up in another way.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And as I said, everyone, do comment, be open, and share.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.